We have our wonderful Demetri Desardis.
Close enough.
Thank you. He is a longtime games industry executive, consultant, and entrepreneur. Currently working as I mentioned before, a project lead in the gaming creator ecosystem at Epic Games. In his 20 plus years in the field, Demetri has worked on titles ranging from poker games on flip phones to Settlers of Catan in VR, Grand Theft Auto Online on PC and consoles. And he was born in Queens, and he has lived in 4 out of the 5 boroughs. Still have yet to come to the Bronx, Demetri.
I'll get there.
Come on, we're having a night market on April 30th. There's a night market in the Bronx if anybody wants to come to that.
It's my wife you got to convince.
Okay. So, hi, hello, Demetri.
Hi.
We've mentioned before you were a project lead at Epic Games. How about you explain to the audience what it means to be a project lead and what kind of responsibilities you have?
Yeah, sure. And this is one of the crazy things about the games industry is that at every company you have a different title, right? And they mean different things to different people. Sometimes even changing from inside the same job. You do one thing one year, you got the same title, you do something totally different the next year. But it's actually product lead, but not that is that problematic. The reason why I say that is because there is something that's a project lead. This is slightly different, but once again, they change them all the time, so it doesn't really matter. But what do I do? So the creator ecosystem at Epic Games is the sort of constellation of people who are creating content with Epic Games tools that don't necessarily work at Epic, right? So people who make levels with Fortnite Creative, in the bigger picture, people who use Unreal Engine to make games. Between the last time you and I spoke, Tim Sweeney announced Unreal Editor for Fortnite. So now I get to say Unreal Editor for Fortnite is a thing that people will also use to build content with in the future. He didn't say when it was going to launch, so I'm not going to say when it's going to launch.
Under NDA.
So I'm the lead for that that product, the group of people that build the tools and establish the best practices for the creators that work with our stuff.
Cool. Thank you very much. And just kind of to follow up that question, how do you go about making your creative decisions as a product lead?
Yeah, it is. It depends very much on the situation. So the first thing that you ever look at as a games developer is what is going to benefit the player the most. And so you're always thinking about, well, what is this going to look like from the player's perspective? How is the experience that I'm working on right now going to make the player's time more enjoyable, going to make it more fun? Obviously you also have to balance, the technology, the constraints that are in place based on, we would all love to design stuff for the fastest, most cutting edge machine on earth, but that's not what everybody's going to be playing your game on. You need to make sure that it runs. So there's some technology constraints you have to think about. And then also the business constraints, you need to keep the lights on. And this, is something that I think not just at Epic, but obviously throughout my career, the key is really thinking about those constraints. You never get handed a blank page. Design a game. It's can be anything. And even if you were, that would be a really, really difficult challenge and not quite as fun as design a game. Here's the tools you're not going to be able to use. Because that's kind of what inspires at least me creatively the most.
Definitely. Kind of just an aside thought that came to me when you mentioned not everybody will be able to use the most advanced technology. I remember this is kind of out there for Club Penguin
Yeah.
when they were designing their ninjutsu, the card jitsu levels for their water stage. A huge problem was that they were working with much more advanced computers than some of the children and like home computers that people would be playing. So it was online multiplayer and it was horrendous. Like you're moving, you have these blocks moving continuously down a waterfall and you have to be moving and people are like lagging like 5 entire frames per second, and it's just not an enjoyable experience. So it's important to know that these things are being considered, and that sometimes people forget that they're working with much more advanced technology than their intended audience.
Yeah, it's one of the truisms. Your machine is a lot better than the players, and your skill is a lot worse. So every time you think, now this puzzle, this is difficult. This is going to take them a couple of weeks to solve. By the end of the day that you launch that game, that thing's going to be solved. It's going to be up on the net. Especially if it's something that multiple people are supposed to work on together. Like 20 minutes later, they've done it. So yeah, keeping that stuff in mind is hugely key.
Definitely. And so another question related to kind of the design and the design process. Mm-hmm. When you mentioned like you don't just get a blank piece of paper that they're like make a game, you start with an idea and you have your design document. Mm-hmm. And when you're working with this document, this living, breathing document, how do you take into account any adjustments that you need to make in the future, especially since any adjustments and any changes that you may want to do is at an expense of time and money?
Yeah. So it's such a cliche in the game development space to say this, but game design is an iterative process. It's like putting on a play or practicing a sport, and when you get there in the actual live performance, people are going to make decisions that are different from what they did in the rehearsals. Likewise, you can run those plays a million times, but when you get out on the field, someone does something slightly different, and you need to, call an audible. So it's, in terms of the documentation, it's first off, like 20 years ago when I started, we were all using like Word documents for everything, and that was just like this horrible, it was problematic because you'd save that thing and then you'd have to share it around manually in order for everybody else to see it, and then the documents would get they'd get stale really fast. These days, if you're not doing design documentation on a wiki or on something like it, get there, because it will just save your life. The capacity for multiple people to edit the document, for multiple people to make comments, to ask questions right in line. I mean, I remember the process of having an engineer ask you, hey, look, this isn't going to be feasible right here based on the last 3 weeks of work you made me do. So what are we supposed to do instead? That used to be a phone call, and it used to take a half hour to get to that. Seeing those things just pop up in line has made the process so much easier. So use those tools, I would say, is lesson number one, I guess.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I in my own program that I've worked with for learning game design, we actually do use Google Docs and Word documents, and I suppose it's a little better with Google Docs since
right.
it's alive, and people can see it multiple times and not a Word document. But they also encourage using things like Notion and
Yep.
Oh, there's this other one. It's like a it's a in browser, like tabs, essentially just making tasks, and other people can see it and like actually see the project flow. Like,
Yeah, one of the keys is just having something that's collaborative and having something that is does a reasonable version tracking and allows multiple people to be able to go back and forth through their notes, through their comments, through the document, and see, okay, well, why did we change this? That's, it felt like a giant leap ahead when we could change it, but then just being able to see like who made this change and why and when. Okay, great, thanks, I've taken everything I need on board just without even having to ask the question.
Definitely. Really, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
I apologize. I really apologize. I think that's all the time that we had.
Do we? Okay.
It is?
Sweet. All right. Well,
okay.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, Demetri, to cut you off.
No.
Before we really head out and onto our next speaker, is there anything that you would want our audience to think about? Is there anything that you would want to impart on our audience?
First off, I was talking beforehand. I didn't. Their games programs didn't exist when I was, when I was in college, and the fact that y'all have them now is amazing. I walked backwards into this industry. If I'd have known that I could have been in it, I would have tried. So I'm both jealous and excited for all y'all being able to do stuff like this. I was really into that talk. It made me feel really cool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for participating.
Yeah.
I saw a hand up in the audience.
Barry on
Someone
the
wants to
mic.
ask a question. Introduce yourself first and ask a question into the mic, please.
My name is Ricardo Peralta. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I wanted to know like what kind of teams you work on, like or with. So like, do you run into mechanical engineers at all, or
I'm sorry. Could you say that last
do you
bit
run
again?
into mechanical engineers at all? in your line of work?
Mechanical engineers only when working with hardware stuff.
Okay.
And there, of course, it's yes. You do, but you also run into a lot of people who have mechanical engineering training, but that's not what they do on the team.
Okay, I got you. So they have experience, like background experience, like doing something else, but they're mechanical engineers, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once, like a lot of it is just learning systems thinking and applying it to whatever it is that your role is.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for the question. And Demetri, thank you so much for your time
Thank
with
you,
us on
Barry.
the stage.
Of course.
Genesis, thank you so much.